I thought our road trip would be a simple escape from the mundane, a chance for Mark and I to reconnect. But as the desert sun set, casting long shadows across the road, something unexpected happened. There, on the side of the highway, stood Jamal, his thumb out, seeking a ride. Little did I know, picking him up would lead us down a path of thrill and turmoil. As the night unfolded under a canopy of stars, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. What started as a simple act of kindness spiraled into a night that would change everything. What would I discover about myself, about Mark, and about the fragile boundaries of our marriage? The first thing you notice about the desert isn't the heat, but the silence. It's like the world holds its breath, waiting for something to happen. That's how it was when Mark and I set out on our road trip, the Jeep's engine the only sound breaking, the stillness. I'm Stacy, 33, and Mark, my husband, has been my rock since high school. We've been together for over a decade, and life, well, it's been comfortable, predictable, but comfort can turn into a rut. And Mark, bless his heart, decided we needed to shake things up. He suggested a spontaneous road trip through the American Southwest. Just the two of us, the open road, and the vast, untamed landscapes. Our route was set. The Grand Canyon, Sedona, and the hidden gem, Antelope Canyon. Mark, always the planner, had everything mapped out. The Jeep was packed with camping gear, enough snacks to feed a small army, and an old playlist of our favorite road trip tunes, each song a memory from our past adventures. As we drove, the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The road ahead was a ribbon of black, winding through the desert. That's when we saw him, a figure on the side of the road, thumb out, looking for a ride. He was a black man, tall, with a kind face that seemed weary from the journey. Mark, ever the Good Samaritan, slowed down, and we decided to offer him a lift. His name was Jamal, and he was heading in the same direction as us. What could possibly go wrong with a little company on a long drive? I climbed into the back seat with Jamal, feeling a bit awkward about leaving him alone back there. Mark gave me a nod of approval, focusing on the road ahead. The conversation started light, with Jamal sharing stories of his travels, his photography hobby, and his love for nature. He was articulate, his voice smooth and calming, contrasting with the rough engine hum of our Jeep. As we drove, the landscape changed from the bustling highways to more secluded scenic routes. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road, and the atmosphere inside the car grew more intimate. I found myself laughing at Jamal's anecdotes, feeling a connection that was both unexpected and exhilarating. Jamal's stories were filled with vivid descriptions of places I'd only seen in magazines. He spoke of the serene beauty of the Grand, Tetons at dawn, the vibrant life in the markets of Marrakesh, and the raw, untouched wilderness of Patagonia. His passion for capturing these moments through his lens was infectious, and I couldn't help but be drawn into his world. The conversation took a turn when he described a particularly close encounter with a bear in Yellowstone. His eyes sparkled with the thrill of the moment, and I could almost feel the adrenaline rush he must have experienced. "You know," he said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "there's something about being out there, alone with nature, that makes you feel alive." His words hung in the air, charged with an unspoken intensity that made my heart beat just a little faster. Mark, sensing the shift, glanced back at us through the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. I could tell he was trying to gauge the situation, perhaps feeling a twinge of jealousy or curiosity. The night was setting in, and Mark suggested we find a spot to camp. We pulled over at a secluded overlook, the stars beginning to pepper the sky. As we set up camp, I noticed Mark was unusually quiet, his eyes often darting towards Jamal and me. After dinner, as we sat around the fire, I accidentally leaned too close to Jamal while reaching for a marshmallow, my lips brushing against his, neck in what could only be described as a kiss. Mark, who was stoking the fire, caught the moment in the reflection of the flames. He didn't say anything, but his silence was palpable. Later, as Mark excused himself to gather more firewood, I found myself alone with Jamal. The tension was thick, the air charged with an unspoken desire. I could feel Jamal's gaze on me, intense and searching. "Stacy," he said softly, his voice barely above the crackling of the fire. "There's something about this trip, about being here with you, that feels different." His words sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of excitement and fear. I knew I should pull away, but instead, I found myself leaning in closer. "Jamal, My voice trailed off as I realized the gravity of what was happening. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting a longing that mirrored my own. The moment was broken by the sound of footsteps. Mark was returning, his silhouette merging with the shadows cast by the fire. I quickly sat back, my heart racing. Mark's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought he could see right through to the turmoil inside me. He dropped the firewood with a thud, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Yeah, just enjoying the fire," I replied, my voice a little too high, too quick. Jamal nodded, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. As Mark sat down, the atmosphere shifted. The warmth of the fire felt suddenly oppressive, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of Mark's gaze, his mind undoubtedly racing with thoughts I couldn't fathom. With Mark out of sight, the night seemed to close in around us, the fire casting dancing shadows that played across Jamal's face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. We talked about life, dreams, and the fleeting nature of human connections. There was something about the way he spoke, the depth in his voice, that made the world outside our bubble fade away. His hand brushed mine, and before I knew it, we were kissing, our lips meeting in a dance of passion and thrill. A moment so charged with electricity, it felt like the first time I had ever truly been alive. When Mark returned, he found us in an embrace, the firelight revealing our indiscretion. Instead of the expected storm of anger, there was a strange calm in his eyes, a curiosity that bordered on fascination. He sat down, not interrupting, just watching. His gaze was intense yet unreadable, like he was trying to solve a puzzle laid out before him. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. Jamal's hand was still on my waist, his touch sending shivers down my spine. Mark's eyes flickered between us, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Was he hurt? Confused? Or was there something else? Something darker, lurking beneath his calm exterior. "Everything okay?" Mark's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that cut through the night. "Yeah, just enjoying the fire," I replied, my voice a little too high, too quick. Jamal nodded, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. Mark didn't respond immediately. He just watched, his gaze lingering on where Jamal's hand rested on me. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. In that moment, I wondered what Mark was thinking. Was he contemplating the fragility of our relationship, the trust we had built over years, now seemingly hanging by a thread? Or was he perhaps intrigued by the scene unfolding before him, a part of him curious about the unexplored territories of human desire and connection? The firelight cast shadows that danced like specters around us, each flicker revealing a new layer of complexity in Mark. The night unfolded with an intensity that was both shocking and liberating. As Mark returned to the campsite, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension. Jamal's hand remained on my waist, his touch sending waves of excitement through me. Mark, instead of intervening, seemed to be drawn into the scene, his voyeuristic interest becoming apparent. His eyes, reflecting the flickering flames, watched us with a mix of curiosity and something else, something I couldn't quite place. As Jamal and I continued our embrace, the boundaries of our marriage blurred. The desert around us, with its vast, silent expanse, seemed to encourage this exploration of not just the physical landscapes of Arizona, but the landscapes of our desires. Mark's presence became part of the experience, his silent approval fueling our actions. The climax wasn't just physical, but emotional, a revelation of hidden facets of our personalities and our relationship. The firelight danced around us, casting shadows that played across our faces, revealing the raw, unfiltered emotions we were all feeling. Jamal's lips met mine again, and this time, the kiss was deeper, more intense, as if we were both trying to convey something profound through our touch. Mark's gaze never left us, his expression shifting from curiosity to a kind of silent, intense approval. It was as if he was seeing me, seeing us, in a new light, one that was both unsettling and exhilarating. The night air was cool, but the heat from the fire and the heat between us made it feel like we were in our own world, isolated from the rest of reality. Later, as the fire died down to embers, Mark finally spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of the night's revelations. I enjoyed watching, he confessed, his words hanging in the air like the smoke from the fire. It was a twist, a release of tension that had built up over years of routine. His admission was not just about the physical act, but about acknowledging a part of himself, a part of us, that we had never explored before. What would this revelation mean for our marriage? The question lingered, unanswered, as we all sat in the quiet aftermath of the night's events. The next morning, the sun rose over the desert, casting a new light on everything. Mark, Jamal, and I sat together, the air filled with a mix of awkwardness and a newfound understanding. We discussed what had happened, not with regret, but with a sense of exploration. Jamal, understanding the complexity of the situation, decided to continue his journey alone, leaving us with his number, suggesting we keep in touch. Mark and I drove on, the road ahead now symbolizing not just a physical journey, but a journey into understanding each other's desires and boundaries. Our marriage, rather than being broken, felt like it had been given a new lease on life, a chance to explore and redefine what love and fidelity meant to us. The landscape around us was changing. the desert giving way to the rugged beauty of the Grand Canyon. The vastness of the view seemed to mirror the expansiveness of our emotions, the depth of our thoughts. Mark's hand found mine on the gear shift, a silent reassurance that we were navigating this new terrain together. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Mark said, his voice steady, reflective. "Last night, it was unexpected, but maybe it was what we needed." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It's like we've been given a second chance to really see each other, to understand what we truly want. The Jeep hummed along the road, the engine's rhythm a soothing backdrop to our conversation. We talked about everything from our fears to our fantasies, the kind of conversations we hadn't had in years. It was as if the desert had stripped away the layers of routine, leaving us raw and real. As we approached a particularly scenic overlook, Mark pulled over. We stepped out, the wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant echo of a river. Standing there, looking out over the canyon, I felt a profound connection to Mark, to the land, to the moment. "Do you think we can make this work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, carried away by the wind. Mark turned to me, his eyes reflecting the morning light. "I think we've already started. We're here, aren't we? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.